Margaret Page, and I'm a legal research and writing professor at Barry University School of Law in Orlando, Florida. And I also write fiction. I have my MFA in writing for children and young adults. I have written a lot, participated in a lot of writing critique groups, been to a lot of conferences and workshops. Writing is my life, and yet I need to write more. I'm not doing it enough. And that's what today's tip is all about. The number one rule of writing is write. I know that seems like, well, duh. Uh, isn't that part just kind of obvious? And even though it may seem obvious, for some of us, me included, that can sometimes be the hardest part. My students will tell you that I'm kind of fussy. I'm kind of particular. We cover a lot of ground in my class. I'm reviewing a lot of different criteria. Some of it's complicated. And, whether it's legal writing or fiction, like with fiction, that is some hard stuff. I mean, you have to dig down into your soul and really see the dream and feel the dream. And then sometimes maybe you do, and that doesn't get translated onto the page, and it's like, back to square one, and you revise and you revise and you revise, and here you are bleeding onto the page, and you take it to your critique group, and maybe they don't see what you saw, and it's all very painful. And with legal writing, it's the same thing. Like, I've seen people in tears before over it because it's like this deep analysis. You're having to read this complex stuff and pull out this case law together and synthesize it. And then in both kinds of writing, there's still the aesthetic at the end. It's not just communicating what you're trying to say. There's overall word choice and rhythm and sentence structure and organization. That is so much stuff, and it can be really overwhelming. And so sometimes I'll have a student who, they're getting their stuff in late, or they're turning it in incomplete, and you're thinking, oh gosh, this person just really doesn't get it. They don't understand. They're out to lunch. And then sometimes you'll have a conversation with them, or you'll look at pieces of their writing, and you'll see that here and there are pieces where they have digested a really complex message, and they've used some techniques that are actually really hard. They've mastered some difficult concepts, and that's when you realize they do get it. They get everything. They get everything that it is you want from them, and they have these super high standards. They want to meet your high standards, and they're overwhelmed, and so they don't get started. It all seems like too much. Anne Lamott, in her book Bird by Bird, talks about how her little brother had this report due the next day about all these different birds, and he was freaking out because he hadn't started. And her father said, let's just start with the first bird. Sometimes you can't even do a full bird. And that's the big thing that I've been doing recently, is I've realized, with my fiction, I'll feel like I have to work on this project, because there are expectations around this particular project, or, I have to get X amount done, and I've realized, if I put that kind of pressure on myself, then I have this sort of overwhelmed feeling, because I'm busy. I'm on the tenure track. I have students to teach. I have important work to perform. And some days I don't have the emotional energy. Some days we all don't have the emotional energy. Let's face it, we all go through major life crises where someone we love dies or whatever. So what I've started doing is I've told myself, you know what? You don't have to work on, you can start a new project, you can work on an old project. You don't have to write incomplete sentences. You don't have to write a lot. It doesn't even have to be good. You just have to get some words related to some writing project or another down on the page. That's all. And what happens when you do that? Two things. First, on those days where you do have some time to devote to it, and particularly when you prioritize this first thing in the morning, then you get going, and sometimes you get a rhythm and you get unstuck, and you write more than you were expecting, or you fuss around with it more than you were expecting. The other thing that happens is that over time, that small little handful of words adds up. One time I read Al Gore's Earth in the Balance, and he was talking about change and these grains of sand, and he was saying, if you keep piling a grain of sand on top of a grain of sand, eventually you have a mountain. And so build your mountain. You were drawn to writing or to a career or other vocation that involves writing for a reason, and that's because you have a voice. Make your voice heard. You have something to say, and it might not come out right the first time you say it or the first 20 times, but keep writing, and eventually we might all learn something from you. Okay, so write on. Happy writing to you.